Welcome to the Responsible Parent Podcast, where families who are overwhelmed and looking to naturally regulate their nervous system can find answers. I'm your host, Caylie O'Patik, and in each episode, we'll go over topics you've been wanting to know more about, and I'll be a reminder to you how everything is cyclical and connected. Today, we have Tara as a guest. She's a professional astrologer, coach, and founder of Luminary Parenting. Tara reports daily on how to use the celestial bodies to support you in your everyday life in an easy-to-understand and practical way on Instagram. She gives further detailed insights to her astrology community, the Luminary Parenting community. Tara believes in parenting your kids, and more importantly, parenting yourself via your natal chart can help us heal and evolve as a collective. She weaves her knowledge of the internal family systems method of psychotherapy, the polyvagal theory of the nervous system, theophosophy, neuroscience, and holistic living into her work. Her passion is illuminating children's natal charts for parents. She also teaches other astrologers how to read children's natal charts. Being a mom of 3, living astrology daily via the moon and her cycles, and ecstatic dance have been her greatest avenues for healing and wholeness. Welcome, Tara.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I was really looking to have an astrologer on my podcast because, as we had just chatted a little bit before, I got initially introduced to astrology actually from a coworker of mine when I was working at Nike in Oregon. She was like my mama bear when we were working. Chrissy, if you're listening, hi. And she was like, "You don't know anything about astrology?" And she was like, "Oh my goodness, like you would be such a natural." And she just got me onto astro.com, and I just dove into every rabbit hole from there. So I've been deeply interested in it. Like I told you, definitely not professional in any ways, but just a novel understanding of how the universe and the energies that pulse through it and the way that it's organized and the math of the universe, the way it works, really does impact us and how we feel and how we act. And it can help us light our way, right? Like in the dark night, it's a little lantern for us, I truly feel. So I was looking for an astrologer to have on this podcast to really talk about the ins and outs. And I don't know you intimately, so I really appreciate you coming on to this podcast. I do have 2 really good astrologer friends, actually. And so it's quite interesting that we linked up, but I think it's for a good reason. And so I think it's so fascinating that you specifically cater to helping parents understand their own charts and their kids' charts, because that's something that one of my dear friends, Sean, actually, with Third Eye Therapy, every time I reach out to him for some sort of astrology insight or reading, I always go the extra step and say, "And what about my daughter? Can you look at my daughter, please?" Because I feel like just understanding what she's going through right now emotionally, or like I'm witnessing it on this end, what's happening? How can I help? What are the solves? Has just been revolutionary, honestly, and such a huge help for me in parenting. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. How has this eclipse season been for you?
Yeah, eclipses, they usher us into that next big step for our soul. So there was so much hype about the eclipse and there was a lot of talk about it. And it's really an opportunity. I talk a lot about, I have an astrology community. So we really walked through this, especially around the time of the eclipse season. What is that next step for you? It's what comes from within, which is the moon. So at a solar eclipse, we have the sun and the moon come together. So it's a new moon, but it's a super new moon on steroids, you could say. So at the new moon, there is this what's feeling like that next little thing that I'm going to work with. And then what's also showing up in the outside, which is like the sun realm, the solar realm. This is the moon realm. Yeah, it's really, I love talking to people around eclipse season, which happens twice a year. This was a big one because it was a solar eclipse, total solar eclipse. But yeah, so just working with those energies.
Absolutely. So I would love to just address maybe the elephant in the room for some of my listeners and viewers, which is what exactly is astrology? And there are some feelings about astrology being against something that is preached in the Bible, right? Or that astrology is a form of witchcraft in some way, or that it's a religion of its own. And so I come from the camp of God gave us the stars, right? And everything that's in the universe, it all exists regardless. And if we don't recognize those patterns, and why would he not give us those tools, right? To help light our way a little bit. It's the same thing if we just pay attention to nature, we just pay attention to our ecosystems.
Yeah.
Everything's there for us to utilize. We don't have to worship it just because we understand it and we know it. And so I would love for you to talk about what is astrology and maybe just address that little bit of taboo nature around it.
Yeah, sure. So we've been paying attention to the movements of the planets since the beginning of time. So it's like the most natural thing
Right.
to be able to do that. And, you know, all astrologers will tell you we don't know exactly how astrology works, but it does.
Yeah.
So there is this connection between what we do down here to Earth and the movements of the planets. And for those people who are like, that sounds crazy, my guess is that you haven't explored it. You haven't learned about it. You probably have not had your natal chart, which is basically a snapshot of the sky the moment you took your first breath, the date, the time, the place, to be able to have someone who is skilled and can read what those symbols mean, what the planets mean, and talk with you about it and really sit with someone. And yeah, how did you that is who I am. Like, how did you know that from my sun and my moon and Mercury? So I think that people that have judgment about it, there's fear and they don't understand it. And so when we don't understand something, we can be afraid of it. But it really is the most natural thing in the world to be able just to sync ourselves up with the movements of the planets and what's happening in the skies. And the goal, really, what I do in astrology is it's all about connection. It's connecting us more to the movements of the planets. And because we're all in many cycles at one time. So my goal is to connect you down here with, I believe that right here, I have a little, this is someone's birth chart. I have a pile of charts that I was doing readings with yesterday. That's like your soul's lesson plan. We each have a very unique one. And it's really important for parents to know their child's soul lesson plan so they can hold them in that. Like in the perfect world, in astrology, we'd all do our charts,
Mhm.
but we come down here onto earth. We come from divine love. We come from God. We come from that place and we get knocked around down here as we learn our lessons and we ultimately we go back there. We go to back to divine love and to wholeness, but we really are here to learn and to experience ourselves as wholeness down here in the earth, but that's very challenging. And so we have these lessons that we're to learn and to be able to understand who you are and a deeper understanding of yourself. That's super helpful. I think it's understanding the map of when you were born, when your kids are born. There is nothing more beautiful because it's all about connection, like connecting you to yourself, connecting you to your people that you love most in the world, your children. So it's always coming from a place of love and connection. And yes, is there astrology that comes from fear? Of course, because there's fear out there in our universe and people can capitalize on that. But yeah, I don't really fully understand why there would be like, if you believe this, then you can't. It's like, it's not about this or that. It's about the whole. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, you talked about how everything is connected, and I actually have an episode, I think it was 3 episodes ago that I released that's about the frequencies of fabric. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that it's not true. So you were talking about how astrologers don't necessarily know how it works, but they just know that whatever's happening in the sky is impacting us down here on Earth.
Yeah.
And just a parallel example of that would be in my episode of the frequencies of fabrics I talked about. I noticed even you think about if have you ever worn like a linen outfit or stood by the beach and in a linen outfit, right? Like it's iconic to have those two things together. Linen vibrates at a frequency that's 5,000 times the amount of the living human body. And so it actually gives us energy when we wear it. And maybe we didn't have the science to prove that 30 years ago necessarily, but that didn't mean that people weren't wearing it on vacation, right? they're wearing it on vacation because like it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel good. Like I'm present now when I wear this. Like this is iconic resort wear, right? That was because of the feeling. So you knew it was connected even before the science was released to actually measure the frequency and show it and prove it to you, right? I mention this almost in every episode because I swear it gets brought up all the time, but my belief is that science is really our explanation of what we witness is already happening. We're like, okay, we're witnessing it happening. So, like, how can we prove it in some way, which is such a human thing to do? Instead of trying to prove it, I love what you said of we don't know why. It just does. So we're just using it. And maybe we'll know
Yeah.
why someday, but right now it's the faith.
Yeah, and there are definitely astrologers. I'm thinking of Stephen Forrest, who's one of my teachers. He wrote a book called The Night Sky Speaks, and that's his attempt at making something that seems so abstract and so crazy, right? Like, how could the planets in the sky influence who we are and tell about our future? And the more modern astrologers and like evolutionary astrologers, we are not predicting fate. Like that is not something we do, but we do like to work with the free will that's available to us down here on planet Earth. Yeah, and I think if there's fear around something, it's just like the people that like are neighbors who might think differently and they believe in this. When there's fear there, if you can move closer to it and try to connect with what is this neighbor's belief that's thinks something totally different than me, like really doing diligence to astrology and trying to connect with it, going to get your natal chart read. There's so many free classes and books on astrology. Let me see if this has any merit. Okay, so I'm a Capricorn sun, a Libra moon, and a Pisces rising. Let me read a little bit about what that means. It does describe me. Huh. And so it's like moving closer to something that we're judging is a very healing gesture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to me, it's in the same camp of human design and even like insights and Myers Briggs, like personality tests that we take with corporate America jobs, even where it's like, okay, we have to try to understand more about ourselves. And from that, we know how we communicate with others. I know something that astrology opened up for me. My first aha moment was because I learned it at work. I didn't, in my work environment was not woo at all. It was like super corporate America. And so I'm learning it at work and I'm entering in my coworkers' information and a few of my coworkers who I don't necessarily communicate very well with. And I'm like, oh, so you need communication in this way. Okay, then I can adapt the way I talk to you. And we had already done insights training, like we already done all the other things. And astrology was far more effective because it's just more in depth, right? There's just so many layers to who we are that astrology gives you a picture of, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and also for those people that be like, I don't really understand how that would work. And if you're a mom, going to have your kids chart read, that's what I do. That's my niche. And it's easier for me to read a kid's chart because they just are truly who they are. The world has not yet told them who they should be or have to be. That can also be like, I don't know how you never met my child, yet you just described him or her and in this most perfect way. That's exactly who they are.
mm.
That can even be, like, very affirming to parents, so, yeah. We always say, "I wish our kids came with an instruction book."
Right.
They
They
do.
did, yeah.
Called their natal chart, yeah.
Yes.
People that
Wow. Oh, I feel like that's the nugget right there. That's going to be so eye-opening to so many parents. It's just, "Oh, there is one." Yeah, and she has it for she has it for you. She can help you read it or translate it. So,
yeah.
I love that. So, going off of that then, I know for me, so I've had my daughter's chart read by 2 separate astrologers just for a whole chart, and then, like I said, my friend Sean, like, every now and again, I'll just be like, "Can you look at what's happening with olive rain?" But it's not, like, systematic necessarily, and so I would love for you to give us some advice on, number 1, maybe the parent who is completely new to astrology and is, "I'm really curious, but I have no idea where to start," what they might do to check in on their kids? Is it something that can be a regular practice, or is it something that's more specific? Oh, if you're not communicating well, just go ahead and take a look at where their Mercury is. Or is it more a year and a half? You can just look out for this thing in their chart. I guess just if you could give some sort of advice for
Or
maybe parents who are very new to astrology. And then also if you have advice for parents who do know a little bit about it and maybe want to consult you for a more in-depth reading?
Yeah. So the moon is really important in a child's chart. I teach for parents that don't know any astrology. It's called Parenting Astrology Academy. And then I teach astrologers how to read children's charts. So the moon is a really important planet in childhood,
Mm.
especially 0 to 7. But really, like I have a 19-year-old that still lives at home. She's still in that moony environment of her family of origin. Our moon is our family of origin. It shows our childhood. It shows the emotional tone of the home that we grew up in. And it's our emotional tone. The moon is really important in childhood. The rising sign is important. Like we all know our sun signs, right? We know, oh, I don't know. I'm pregnant. I'm due on January 1st. And it's, oh, you're going to have a Capricorn.
Mhm.
And the sun is something we move towards as adults. It's we take that hero's journey to finding our purpose and our identity. That's our sun, who we are. So it isn't such a big player in childhood, although we can definitely see like the element or the quality. The Aries, Sagittarius, Leo 4-year-old is going to be fiery, and we can really feel that. And they'll refine that expression because those are the three fire signs: Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. As they move, every time the sun comes around and it's their birthday, they refine that. So a lot of parents will talk about, oh, my kid's a Leo. And that there's something to be said about that, right? Because that's still who they are. They'll develop more into that. But the moon is really the key to unlocking things like for the parents to be like, because the moon is our way to feel good. We all have one. It's our emotional body. Yes, it was the vibe of our primary nurturing caregiver. It really is that planet that comes online first. So
Mm.
it is like a really good parenting hack to know, do I have a fire moon kid? If you just know the elements, do I
Mhm.
have a fire moon kid, a water moon kid? If their moon is in Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, they're super sensitive. They need a little bit more protection than like the fire moon kid who's they just need action. They're nurtured by fun and in the moment.
Mm.
They're there. And the water moons, they need a little bit, that's an internal feminine yin side. They need more quiet time. They're more empathetic. And so to be able to understand them, you can really tailor because mom is the moon in the chart. That's a big subject. I could do a whole podcast on that. But to really tailor your mothering, your nurturing of that child towards their moon sign, the
Mhm.
rising is important also. But when we talk about, and I know you talk about this, the nervous system, it's really that moon is the key for that.
Sure.
Uh, their moon, but also your moon, like to be able to know your own natal moon,
Mhm.
because they learn how to regulate their nervous system and come back into equilibrium
Mhm.
by linking up to your nervous system. Like your nervous system is teaching them how to regulate or not.
Right.
Whenever we talk about our kids and nervous system, it's like the parents just sort of like, how do I regulate their nervous system? How do I like get them back? And it really is here. It's understanding your kid for sure, but
Mhm.
it's really like working with yourself in your own nervous system because it really is by some beautiful holy design that our kids are our biggest teachers. Of course, we have to hold the container for them. We are the parent, but they show us the parts of us that were not allowed when we were growing up. And that's why we say they push our buttons, and they do. And so there's something they bring to us in helping that we can't help them regulate their nervous system without ours being regulated first. And that is a gift that they help us to heal and work with our own system, which will help theirs. That was a lot.
It
Um,
was. I know. I have so much feedback to that now. It's like, no. Yes. No, that's so wonderful, though. I have noticed that intimately with my daughter on everything that you talked about on so many levels. Just this past week, we had a heart to heart conversation about what we are mad about, what we're sad about, and what we're glad about within our family. And we went back and forth. And I said, past, present, future, just let's get the emotions out. And I already know her moon and mine, and they're very different. And I've been consciously parenting her knowing those things, but that doesn't mean that I'm perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And it was just such an eye-opening experience because I realized while telling her the things that I'm sad about, I just started bawling. And all the things I was sad about were things that happened before she was even born or just maybe as she was being born. And a lot of it was my childhood. And I was like, I'm sad that when I was your age, I wasn't allowed to do this and I wasn't allowed to be this. And seeing, as I'm saying it out loud, how I was playing out like the same narrative in some ways with her. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, no. But at least we did it and it was really healing. But I'd be interested if you'd be open to doing a short little live coaching while we're on the call. So my daughter and I actually have really similar charts, which is interesting, and think that there's a lot to be said about all of that in general, because I
Yep.
feel like we could go
It
into a
works that way.
probably a whole I've noticed that. So, again, I'm a novice in astrology, but when I look at, like, other people's charts or, like, my grandparents and then my mom and my uncle and then, like, myself, I'm like, we all share these things.
Always happen. It works that way.
It's like genealogy, but, in the
Well,
stars.
if you think of it like this is your child's soul curriculum and they have a lot of Aries or Mars in their chart, they have to come and spend some time marinating in that energy. So they're like, oh, Moon and Aries, mom, I'll take you. This
Yeah,
is really the way that I believe it works.
yeah.
And yeah, I definitely see the themes in families. It works that way. Every once in a while, we'll have, oh my God, I feel like I've been dropped. We do
Yeah,
have that every once in a while, and that's its own unique karma.
sure.
But yeah, you're right that there are similar themes.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So with my daughter and I, we both have 7 placements in Capricorn. So we're very Capricorn heavy. But her sun and rising are Capricorn and my moon is Capricorn.
Mhm,
My sun is Sagittarius and that's her moon.
mhm. Yeah.
So our sun and moons are switched, right? And it's just so interesting because her emotions are so big. And I remember, so my mom is a Leo sun, and growing up, even now in my 30s, my mom's came to me, you just never let your feelings out. I was always so concerned about you. Like, we went through some big traumatic things, and you acted so okay. And I was like, I was like, the way that I processed emotions was very logically. So like I processed them, but it wasn't in a big blow up way because I just have this like Capricorn moon and it was just like, let me process this logically. And then I have now my daughter who she is a logical person, but then her emotions are very big and fiery. And so it perplexes me at times because I'm like, I know you're logical. Like, where is this coming from? But could you maybe go into the relationship between, like, how maybe the Earth moon that I have could be some sort of container or, like you said, nervous system regulator for Olive? Because that is something that I'm struggling with. Because right now it feels like I just dampen her fire all the time, and I'm trying to hold space, but it is hard.
Yeah. The way that I like to work it is that, and I'll do this in my sessions, is the way to work with the nervous system is when you're triggered, is the bottom
Sure.
line. So when you're triggered, what is it that she's doing that when she does it, you have parts of you, your very smart, wise nervous system, which always is in service of keeping us safe.
Mhm.
When she's doing something that your nervous system says that's not safe, what is she doing? Is she just being big, bold, and loud? Or,
Yeah. No, usually she is crying she's 10 years old, and usually what triggers me most, honestly, is when she gives, like, really big, like, toddler tantrums over something that I feel is a basic necessity of life. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, helping me fold laundry, just, like, very daily things, and when she has, like, big breakdowns about it often, I just get really irked.
yeah. So it's really working with what she's showing. Like your nervous system is saying those breakdowns, those big toddler meltdowns, or whatever they are, is not feeling safe for me.
Yeah.
Like when she's struggling, and you're struggling like, "Oh my god, is she it could be like, is she just gonna be 18 and still doing this?" You're both struggling, so you both need support. So the first is to check in with what's going on and to know that she's a completely different way of operating as a Sagittarius moon. You're very practical, and it also the sign is part of the story, but where it's at in her chart,
Mhm.
what other planets are talking to the moon. This is what I teach about in Parenting Astrology Academy. That also flavors her expressions. But there is something that like it's checking in with yourself, like she's just being her, and that like really resonating with her. This is just, even if it sounds crazy to you, and this
Mhm.
is as a Capricorn moon, you're just really efficient. It feels good to not gloss over things, but this is taking too much time and we have a lot of things to do in this
Yeah.
evening. I don't have time for this. It's just
Yeah.
our moon is our default. So it's just where
Mhm.
you go.
Yeah.
And so really, like really reflecting back and just getting in her world, like it is a big deal for her, right?
Mhm.
Her moon is ruled by Jupiter, which is so big.
Mhm.
There is going to be like over the top emotions. And she is the Capricorn sun, but as a 10-year-old, she has a lot of time before that planet really comes online and starts to develop. There is a part of her that's logical and rational, but
Mhm.
what you're really working with in childhood is that moon. And yeah, I could go over step by step, but it's more like that, which I know being the responsible parent is that resonating with them, reflecting back. This is really frustrating for you. You wished it would have gone this way.
Yeah.
And it just like, and you're also doing the work of regulating yourself first.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot that we're just talking about this one little moon sign
Mhm.
signature in the chart, but the whole chart really needs to be taken into account.
Yeah.
But my question for you would be like, were you allowed to be big over the top and fall apart? Or there's something she's showing you that wasn't welcome or wasn't held when
Yeah.
you were younger.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's touching on what we went over this earlier this week when I had that little open up session with her is yes, so I felt and I have talked to my mom about this recently, actually just last summer, but I've definitely felt when I was young that both of my parents were very young when they had me, and their emotions were always up here, and the way they expressed them were up here, and so I felt that if I ever were to express my emotions in a big way, that they not I felt, if I did, they were amplified by them. It was almost like a one up. If I had to do this, then they went up here, and then it just became a really unsafe feeling environment, and so I think that I do think that I was created and given to them in the way that I did have my Capricorn moon to where I didn't need to express myself in that way so often. But when I did need to, I definitely did not feel safe to. And I do feel that with Olive, sometimes when she triggers me like that, I'm like, okay, this is because I wasn't allowed to. I didn't feel safe to do this. I need to create that space for her to feel safe to have these big emotions. But then at the same time, I still am who I am. So in the back of my mind, I'm still like, after the 10th time, it just gets a little bit challenging, right? And so this has been really helpful for me already, Tara. So thank you because I really had been trying to look at my daughter's chart holistically and knowing that, focusing on the moon sign when they're younger is really vital. That actually helps me quite a bit and it helps me understand a lot more, I think, about how we interact right now. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the house that the moon is in also flavors that expression of
Mhm.
her and, what she needs. Because this is like attachment theory. If a need is met
Mhm.
in a way that feels good, then the need goes away. But when we have moon needs that aren't met, they just keep showing up in our adulthood in weird ways,
Yes.
And so, yeah, it is a little parenting hack that
Yeah.
is really important.
Well, I know her moon is in the 12th house, right? Yeah, the house of Pisces. And I find that interesting too because I I almost have no water in my chart. The only water I have is my what Pluto and Scorpio.
Yeah.
So, other than that, and so she has most of her Capricorn is actually up in, and her Sagittarius moon is up in that 12th house there. And so that flavor is really, I'm like, it's foreign to me. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you can really like, she's helping you develop your water.
Hmm.
And nothing really needs to change in her. Like it's really like, how can she's helping me to embrace my water more, to learn even, it's Capricorn moon doesn't really have time for water. It's like, who has
Right.
time for emotions? There's things to do,
Right.
and so resonating with her to feel that mom gets me and
Mm,
that my emotions are really allowed to show up. And
mm,
even it's a very spiritual signature, also the Sag moon in the 12th house, but that there is time for my feelings to show up in my family.
mm,
So, yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think just that little, even kind of mini session is so interesting. And I hope that if there are some parents who are listening who are astro curious or just haven't even thought about, incorporating astrology into their parenting and their understanding of their relationship with their kids, that they got something out of this as well.
No, I mean, this is what I teach in my classes for
Yeah.
parents. So if you get on my email list, if you follow me on Instagram, it's Luminary Parenting. You can get on my email list, and then I'll let you know when we open the doors to Parenting Astrology Academy. But it is a really great, yeah, it's a great way it brings connection into
Mm.
families.
Oh, I love that. And that's what it's all about, right? I feel like that's what we're here for. It's just to connect, right? And
Yeah.
so, okay, so my podcast is named The Responsible Parent, and it's part serious and part tongue in cheek because a lot of the things that I've done in my parenting journey exactly go against what I've been taught is responsible. But I just did them because I felt that they were responsible in my heart, even though there was no social evidence of it. And so I like to ask my guest, whether it's related to astrology or parenting or not, it could be something completely different. Is there anything in your life that you can think of where you've done something that has been conventionally irresponsible, but you just knew was the right thing?
Okay, so I'll tell you a little astrology trick.
Okay.
My Mercury's in Capricorn and I love to think about things. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, so on the spot questions can really throw me.
Oh,
My
sorry. Yeah.
Mercury is also retrograde in my
Yeah.
natal chart. So it's like I need a little extra time
Yeah.
to think about things. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things that when I think, and it would be especially from when, I started, I became a mom in 2001. So when I think about the things that it was like my Saturn return, becoming a
Mm,
mom, like, those things, Saturn return kicks you in adulthood. But I
mhm,
was really fresh out of the template of the first 28 years of my life and how I was parented. And so I just took that into my own parenting. And when I look at those things, I was like, when I look at those things, I was just doing the thing that was done to me. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's like, and that's all I knew. And so you can only do what you know. But it wasn't
right.
really until I started reading about attachment theory and, nursing opened a whole new world for me of like just being receptive to my baby's needs.
Mm,
And sure, I screwed up a ton,
mhm.
when they were, I feel much wiser now, but
Yeah.
like when I at my firstborn, we joke because he's 23 now. We joke about it all the time. I'm
Oh
like, yes,
no.
about that. I was just doing the best I could at
Sorry.
the time with the information that I knew.
Yeah.
And thankfully he can joke about it, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. No, I think that's something everybody, I think every single parent can resonate with that, right? I don't think that's too bold of a statement that when we begin parenting, it's usually, even if we go into it with this mindset of, we're going to be this way and it's going to be different from how I was raised or whatever, all of a sudden your automatic nervous system kicks in a little bit, right? And then you kind of observe something that you're doing or like habits that you have. You're like, wait a minute.
Well, and that's what we talked about this whole podcast is that's the moon. your automatic reactions. There it is in the moon, and they're coming from the environment that I marinated in when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So, and that can be frustrating because, right, we're all like, well, we're going to do it differently. And then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, but when we're pushed against the wall and stressed out, or our nervous system says that's not safe, then we resort back to like, and we hear our mom's voice or our dad's voice come out of us. And not, our parents loved us very much. And when you say
Yeah.
that, like I have parents that love me very much,
Mm.
but we raise different generations. Like our kids have a big charge to undo the mess that we're kind of in right now as a
Yes.
consciousness. So they need to be nurtured in a different way.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I've felt that ever since I had my daughter, and I'm a single mom, and her dad and I haven't been together. I mean, really we were on and off even at the beginning, right? I had one long-term relationship outside of his where we tried to co-parent. And the thing that I kept iterating with him and with her dad is she's different. This is different. There's no parenting book about her right now, right? Like she is ushering in something that's completely new. And also the way that she processes feelings and emotions and the things that she feels is completely different than like what we were allowed to feel or allowed to be doing when we were kids. And I've just had this really innate knowing as well that I feel that her generation is finally able to be raised in a way where they can have an independent voice separate from the public, like the general
Yeah.
public noise. And it's so cool watching these little like 10-year-olds speak their mind against our societal norms. I just think it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, that age is the Uranus and Aries generation of don't tell me what to do. It's that very fiery, I'm going to be who I am.
Mm,
And the more we can embrace, because I have an 11-year-old,
hmm
and yeah. And also with your daughter, I love that name, Olive. With her moon in the 12th house, she does feel a lot from the collective. Like that
Yeah,
is a child that's a healer, but also needs a lot. It's almost like she has a Pisces moon,
sure.
even though she's a Sagittarius for that vibe. So it's like they need a
Mhm.
little special handling.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
absolutely. And I felt that even before I knew too much about astrology, and something that she was really intuitive with, and of course I like ushered along with her as well, but is designating when she knows if an emotion is coming from herself or outside of herself. I mean,
Yeah.
she was like a toddler and deciphering that, which was really cool. And so she'd cry and I'd be like, "What's wrong?" And she'd say, "I don't know." And I remember when I used to do that with my mom, I'd get just reamed. Like, "What do you mean you don't know?" And I was like, "Okay, what do you mean you don't know?" And we just
You
kind of,
had to pull it together, right?
yeah,
With your
yeah.
Capricorn moon.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, "Okay, Olive, what do you mean you don't know?" And she'd be like, "It feels like it's not mine. It feels like I just feel it." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." She's like, "Nothing happened to me today to make me sad, but I am sad." And she's this little like curly-headed, 3-year-old telling me this. And I'm like, "I believe you." Like I believe that. I think that you can feel a lot. And during those times, it's always when there's mass panic or anxiety or something's going on, and I think we all feel those things, but I absolutely, she's very in tune with other people's emotions, whether it be the people around her or just like the entire planet. She'll
Yeah.
just feel what's happening, even with the genocides that started happening in Palestine and all that. Before I knew it was happening, because I don't follow the news very closely, Olive showed me that something was happening, and I was like, "Oh," like hurting, like loss, mourning. And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay." And then I discovered that later and I'm like, "All right," like she's so
Yeah.
tapped in. It's incredible. And so I love that you can validate that as well. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. She's very absorbent.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh, well, Tara, I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff forever, and especially about my daughter. That's like what parents are best at, is talking about their kids, right? So, but I do try to keep my episodes relatively short. So, I think in general, this was a great conversation. And for our listeners, if any of you have direct feedback or there's something that you're more interested in or would like us to go into more depth about, if you could just message us and maybe we can hop on another interview and kind of address other things more specifically. But
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much, Tara. And I will definitely get all the information from you to put in our show notes on how parents can work with you so they can get to know themselves and their children more through the lens of astrology and with your help.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we are connected.